There is a people in the Pyrenees mountains who have no genetic equivalent in modern Europe, not in the East, not in the West, not anywhere the data looks. Their language, Euskara, has no relatives, anywhere, in any language family on Earth. Every other European language connects to something. Basque connects to nothing. Linguists have spent 2 centuries looking. The answer is always the same. This language existed before the world we know arrived. But it gets stranger, because their DNA says the same thing. When geneticists ran whole genome sequencing on the Basque population, what they found was not what they expected. It was not what any model predicted. The rest of Europe was largely replaced. The Basques were not. DNA is about to explain how that is possible. Every language on Earth can be placed in a family. Sanskrit, Latin, English, Hindi, all Indo-European. Arabic, Hebrew, Amharic, all Semitic. Chinese, Tibetan, Burmese, all Sino-Tibetan. The family trees branch differently, but every language sits on one of them. Basque belongs to no family. None. You cannot borrow this language's structure. You cannot recognize its grammar. You cannot find its ancestor. Because its ancestor was speaking it before the ancestors of every other European language arrived. Linguists classify Euskara as a language isolate, the only known surviving pre-Indo-European language in Western Europe. 2 centuries of systematic analysis, thousands of proposed connections, every single one rejected. This language has outlasted every scholarly attempt to connect it to anything. This language was old when Latin was young. It was ancient when the first Celtic tribes arrived. It existed before the concept of Europe had any meaning. It predates every civilization that shaped what this continent became. And today, 750,000 people still speak it. The question is not just how the language survived. The question is why the people who spoke it survived genetically intact, when every other pre-Indo-European group in Western Europe was absorbed, replaced, or erased. For most of history, the answer seemed obvious. The Pyrenees. The mountain range separating the Iberian Peninsula from the rest of Europe, one of the great geographic barriers of the continent. It shaped trade routes. It frustrated armies. It divided climates, cultures, and kingdoms. The Basques, nestled in those mountains, seemed to be a product of geography, isolated by terrain, preserved by altitude. Roman writers noted them. A people with a language no Roman could pass, an identity that did not map onto the categories Rome used for everyone else. They were there before Rome arrived. They were still there when Rome fell. 2 replacement events define European prehistory. The first, approximately 7,000 years ago, Neolithic farmers migrated from Anatolia and spread across the continent. They did not simply arrive alongside existing populations, they largely replaced them. The hunter-gatherer communities who had lived in Europe for tens of thousands of years were absorbed, genetically diluted, and in most regions effectively gone within a few thousand years. The second, approximately 4,500 years ago, pastoralists from the Pontic Caspian steppe swept west. This was not a gradual process. It was a transformation, and it was massive. The Basques, the hypothesis went, were simply shielded. The farmers came. They spread across Spain, across France, across the continent. The Basques absorbed some of that ancestry, but not as much. The hunter-gatherer ancestry that defines who lived here before agriculture remained in higher concentrations than anywhere else in Western Europe. And when the steppe migrations came, the mountains seemed to have provided the barrier. For a time, the ancient DNA record is unambiguous. In 2015, a landmark study sequenced ancient DNA from 69 Europeans spanning thousands of years. The Yamnaya expansion came into sharp focus. Steppe pastoralists began moving into Europe approximately 4,500 years ago, and within centuries, they had reshaped the continent's genetic architecture in ways no historical record fully captured. That transformation was enormous. In many northern and central European populations today, steppe ancestry accounts for the majority of the total genomic profile. The genetics of modern Europe are, in large part, the genetics of people who arrived from the East. In the Basque population, steppe ancestry is dramatically lower than in any surrounding population, among the lowest on the continent. A second study from the same year examined ancient Iberian hunter-gatherers and Neolithic farmers. The finding was consistent and equally stark. Basque territory retained far more Western European hunter-gatherer ancestry than the rest of Iberia. The farming replacement that swept the continent 7,000 years ago also left a significantly smaller imprint on the Basque region. Two studies, two independent research teams, two waves of replacement. The Basques were not slightly different from surrounding populations. They were in a category by themselves. The haplogroup data reinforced what the whole genome analysis showed. Specific R1b subclades at high frequency, indicating deep local continuity. Very low R1a, the lineage strongly associated with steppe populations, in stark contrast to most other European groups. Mitochondrial patterns consistent with Mesolithic ancestry. The picture was consistent across every method used to analyze it. The Basque genomic profile clusters closer to Mesolithic European hunter-gatherers than to Bronze Age Europeans. Every migration wave that redrew Europe's genetic map washed over the Basques and left them largely unchanged. Not slightly different, largely unchanged. The genome does not argue. In 2019, a comprehensive study of 403 ancient Iberians confirmed the pattern. Basque genetic continuity extending back to approximately 3000 BCE with minimal subsequent admixture. 3 independent studies, 3 research teams. The conclusion was the same each time. Something had protected the Basques across millennia of continental transformation. The mountains, the thinking went, were the explanation. The Yamnaya swept into Iberia from the northeast, but encountered a fortified geographic position. The Basques, protected by altitude and terrain, maintained a separation that other populations could not sustain. It was a satisfying answer. Clean, geographic, the mountains. That was the explanation. The mountains. That was the explanation. Except the data disagreed. When geneticists mapped genetic isolation across the Basque region against geography, the correlation was imperfect. The mountain boundary and the genetic boundary did not align precisely. The Pyrenees are a sharp, physical line. The genetic gradient across Basque territory told a different story, and it was messier than any mountain range. When they mapped genetic isolation against language use, the correlation was precise. This is the finding that changes everything. Communities where Euskara was spoken continuously, generation after generation, without linguistic interruption, show the strongest genetic isolation. These are not subtle differences. Communities at the geographic margins of Basque territory where Euskara was gradually abandoned show intermediate patterns. More admixture, less isolation, a genetic profile trending toward the surrounding populations. The transition is not gradual geographically, it is binary linguistically. Speak Euskara, genetically distinct. Lose Euskara, begin converging toward the regional European average. The mechanism is endogamy, marriage within a defined community. Language defines community. Community defines the boundary within which families form. When families form within the linguistic community, genetics stay within the linguistic community. No army enforced this. No law required it. It was the invisible gravity of shared identity, the tendency of people to build lives with people like them. In the Basque world, the defining line of like them was the language. For thousands of years, communities that spoke Euskara chose partners from within the Euskara-speaking world. The social architecture of language produced a genetic architecture that 3 waves of continental-scale migration could not fully dismantle. The language boundary and the genetic boundary are effectively the same boundary. A 2019 study drawing on 403 ancient and modern Iberians confirmed the correlation explicitly. The pattern of admixture tracks linguistic boundaries, not just geographic ones. The mountains created the possibility of isolation. The language made it permanent. For at least 2,500 documented years, the Basque genetic profile remained stable. While the continent transformed through farming migrations, steppe expansions, Roman conquest, Moorish invasion, and the wars of Reconquista, their DNA held. The Pyrenees gave the Basques space. Euskara gave them permanence. The Basques are not a curiosity. They are the answer to a question Europe has never properly asked itself. Who were the original Europeans? Not the Romans, not the Celts, not the Germanic tribes. Before all of them. Before the farmers who arrived from Anatolia. Before the steppe pastoralists who swept from the east. Before any of the population movements that built the genetic architecture of modern Europe. What did those original people look like, genetically? Who were they? The answer has been living in the Pyrenees. The Basques are not exotic migrants who arrived from somewhere strange. They are the remnant, the people who were already here when the ice retreated 12,000 years ago, who were already here when the farmers came, who were already here when the steppe migrations swept the continent. They have always been from here. During the last glacial maximum, approximately 20,000 years ago, most of northern Europe was uninhabitable. Human populations in Western Europe survived in refugia, pockets of habitable terrain in southern France and the Iberian Peninsula. The Pyrenees region was one of those refugia. When the climate warmed and the ice retreated, the people who had survived there did not disappear. Their descendants are alive today. They speak Euskara. The rest of Europe remembers them only as a faint genetic signal, a few percentage points of hunter-gatherer ancestry in modern populations, diluted across 7,000 years of mixing. The Basques carry that signal in full. The people who were here first are still here. They still speak the language they were speaking before any of us arrived. There's a concept in genetics called selection pressure, the external forces that determine which lineages survive and which are absorbed or erased. War, disease, climate, competition. These are the mechanisms through which populations transform. The Basques survived by none of those mechanisms. They survived because of something that does not appear in most models of population genetics: collective identity expressed through language. No army enforced their separation. No law required that Euskara speakers marry other Euskara speakers. No decree mandated genetic continuity. Generation after generation, without coordination or design, communities chose to remain who they were. And that choice, repeated across 2,500 documented years and likely much longer, is recorded in the genome. Their DNA is the record of that choice. 750,000 people speak Euskara today. That language survived Francoist Spain, which banned it in the 20th century and actively tried to force its extinction. It survived that too. The Basques are what it looks like when a people decide, without any formal declaration, to remain themselves across everything. Every migration, every empire, every wave that reshaped the world around them. DNA confirms it. They succeeded.
Euskara ez da nire ama, ni ba naiz bere alaba.